The last light of the dying sun bled across the jagged horizon, turning the sky into a wound of crimson and gold. Its swollen disk hung low, as if the heavens themselves sagged under the weight of millennia. Beneath that fading star lay the husk of a once great capital, a city built for gods, now nothing more than a mausoleum of broken spires and dust. Wind moved through the shattered avenues like a whispered elegy, carrying the ashes of an age no one remained to remember. The Immaterium stirred at the edges of reality. It was subtle at first, an oily shimmer in the air, a distortion in the light. But to those cursed to endure eternity, it was unmistakable. The warp was hungry. It always was. And upon the highest ruin, where the skeletal remains of a throne still clung to the sky, stood the last emperor of the cursed suns. His name was forgotten by most, even among the dwindling ranks of his own people. To the mortal realms, he was a myth, to his enemies, a nightmare, and to himself, a relic, unchanged, unyielding, and unbearably weary. He had ruled for so long that even the memory of why he fought had faded. He remembered banners once bright as dawn, raised in defiance of every foe the galaxy could conjure. He remembered oaths sworn in fire and steel, comrades who stood beside him in the forging of an empire. He remembered their faces as they died, each one like a blade drawn across the soul. Those memories lingered, sharper than any weapon, cutting deeper with every century. "My people are gone," he murmured to the wind. The words were not a confession. They were an acknowledgement of a truth long known. Around him, the once immortal legions had dwindled to a mere handful, scattered across the fringes of the empire. The fleets were gone, the fortresses empty. His enemies had not slain him, but time had. And yet, deep in the marrow of his ancient bones, a whisper persisted. It was the same voice that had followed him through centuries of conquest and loss, a voice that promised redemption, or something close enough to wear its face. It came again now, threading through the silence. You could have it back. You could rebuild. You could undo the ruin. The Emperor's eyes narrowed against the dying light. He had long since learned not to answer the whispers aloud. Too many who spoke to the warp eventually stopped speaking to anything else. But temptation did not fade. It grew. In all his years, the only thing that had never left him was the ache to return to what had been lost. The ruins shifted beneath a sudden gust, scattering dust from the bones of the throne. For a heartbeat, he saw it as it once was. Gleaming gold, banners snapping in the wind, the roar of a million voices hailing his name. Then the vision was gone, and only silence remained. To those who would hear this tale, know this. Before we step deeper into the shadows, we wish to speak to you directly. You who listen across the void, know that in this cold, endless galaxy, you are cherished. We truly love and care for you. Your place here matters. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now grab your coffee and let's get started. For the Emperor, if he could still call himself that, this was the end of the beginning. The long night that had consumed his empire was reaching its quiet, inevitable conclusion. And yet, in the darkest hour, he felt the stirring of something dangerous. Not hope, not exactly, but the dangerous cousin of hope. Resolve. Resolve to reclaim. Resolve to fight. Resolve to bargain with powers that no mortal or immortal should approach. The first step toward damnation is never a plunge. It is a foot placed carefully, almost reluctantly, on a path that feels familiar. As the last light of the star fell below the horizon, the Emperor took that step, and the galaxy, though it did not yet know it, began to change once more. Beneath the scarred heavens of Nerethis, the obsidian pillars of the High Council's chamber loomed like silent sentinels. Light flickered unevenly from braziers burning with cold blue flame, an ancient relic of the Empire's golden age, when sorcery and science were one and the same, when gods walked openly among mortals. Now those flames cast long shadows over faces hardened by millennia, faces weary from endless campaigns yet sharp with suspicion. The warlord, once known as Emperor, now simply the last son, sat at the center of the council, a throne carved from blackened stone and engraved with sigils that pulsed faintly in the dim light. Around him, the Blood Oath brothers gathered, sworn allies whose loyalty had been sealed in rituals soaked with sacred blood. These men and women were the Empire's heartbeats, each carrying the burden of eternity alongside him. Yet beneath the solemn vows, there were fractures. "Your resolve wavers," intoned High Commander Vorian, his silvered beard trembling with disdain. "The enemies at our gates smell weakness. Your hesitation costs us worlds." The last son's eyes, hollow orbs that had seen centuries, met Vorian's with calm sorrow. "I do not hesitate because of fear," he replied slowly. "I hesitate because I remember what victory has cost us." "What it always costs," a murmur rippled through the chamber. None dared voice the same doubts openly, but all felt their sting. Vorian's gaze sharpened. "Memory is a poison. We were born to conquer, to endure beyond the fleeting lives of mortals. To do less is to betray the blood oath." Another voice rose then, a woman's, soft yet unwavering. Lysara, the Empire's chief archivist, keeper of forbidden law, stepped forward. Her face was youthful, a miracle of biotransference and arcane stasis, but her eyes held centuries of sorrow. "The blood oath binds us, yes," she said, "but it is not an unbreakable chain. It can fracture as easily as steel if wielded with malice." The last son's heart tightened. Lysara was his closest friend, the only one who dared challenge him without fear. She represented the fragile hope that humanity might still survive beneath their immortal burden. He recalled the night of their oath, years before, beneath the bleeding skies of a dying moon. Each had spilled their blood into the eternal chalice, promising loyalty unto death or beyond. They had believed then that their empire would last forever, but forever was a cruel illusion. "I carry the weight of endless centuries," the last son said, "every victory etched in the faces of those who fell beside me, and every loss, an echo in the halls of my mind. The blood oath is sacred, but it does not erase the pain. It does not answer why we endure." Vorian scoffed, but Lysara's expression softened. "Perhaps we endure not for glory, but for redemption. For a chance to right the mistakes buried in time." Before the council could reply, the chamber doors slammed open, and a herald entered with urgent steps. "My lords and ladies," he announced, breathless, "the outer systems report renewed rebellion. The fleets loyal to the Empire are fractured. The rebel vanguard strikes with ferocity unmatched. The warlord's grip loosens." A heavy silence fell. The last son rose, his form towering and regal despite the weariness that clung to him like a shroud. "Then we shall remind them why the blood oath was sworn," he said, voice a low promise. "We will fight, not because we desire conquest, but because to surrender is to die 1,000 deaths." Lysara stepped beside him, her hand resting lightly on his armored arm. And yet, the whispers grow louder. The warp does not sleep. It calls. Vorian's eyes narrowed. "We have walked too close to those whispers. The last thing we need is to answer their call. But perhaps it is not a call to answer, the last son whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Perhaps it is a door we must open. The council chamber, built for unity, was now a crucible of doubt. The warlord's closest allies, once united by purpose and blood, now wrestled with secrets and shadows. The Empire's heart beat unevenly, strained by the weight of its own history. Outside, the galaxy waited, silent, watching, and ready to claim what remained. The silver light of Nerethis' twin moons cast eerie patterns across the strategist's chamber, a stark contrast to the flickering shadows of the council's obsidian halls. Here, within the labyrinthine citadel carved deep into the planet's bedrock, Chevra moved with deliberate grace. His every step was a measured chess move, his presence both unsettling and magnetic. To the Empire, he was a trusted advisor, the master tactician who had turned the tide of countless battles. To himself, he was something far darker, a prophet of ruin cloaked in silvered words. Chevra watched the hololiths flicker, images of shattered star systems and rebellious fleets spread before him like a map of inevitability. The Empire was unraveling, yet every thread Chevra touched wove further discord. His loyalty was a mask, his true allegiance lost somewhere in the swirling depths of the Immaterium. When the last son had ascended to the throne, Chevra had been among the first to swear the blood oath. But centuries of silence had gnawed at him like acid. The eternal campaigns, the endless bloodshed. It was all a cage, gilded but no less suffocating. Chevra believed in change, but not the kind forged in the heat of battle. He sought rebirth through destruction, order from chaos. His latest plan was subtle, nothing less than the Empire's undoing from within. The recent rebellions were no accident. They were sparks in a powder keg, and Chevra held the match. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The door slid open to reveal a figure cloaked in shadows, her face hidden beneath a hood. She moved with the silence of a predator, yet her eyes betrayed reverence. "My lord," she whispered. The whispers grow louder. The warp stirs. The emissaries have arrived. Chevra's lips curved into a smile, both cold and knowing. "Good," he said. "Our time is near." The stars themselves are aligning. He rose and stepped to a window overlooking the ruins of Nerethis' ancient temple complex, once a place of worship for forgotten gods. Now it was a relic, like all things in this empire, cracked, fading, waiting. The last son clings to old loyalties, Chevra mused aloud, but loyalty is a shackle. We will free him, whether he knows it or not. The Immaterium offers power beyond his fragile mind's grasp. He will become more than a ruler. He will become a god among ashes. The woman bowed and departed silently, leaving Chevra alone with the shadows. He pulled from his robes a small obsidian shard, etched with glowing runes, pulsing with unnatural light. It hummed faintly, a tether to the warp. Chevra's thoughts turned inward, to the endless labyrinth of his own ambitions and doubts. Was he a savior or a harbinger of doom? Perhaps both. In the twilight of empires, heroes and villains are separated only by the lens of time. The hololiths flickered again, showing the warlord's face, stoic, tired, a man haunted by the ghosts of centuries. Chevra allowed himself a moment of pity. The last son was trapped, bound by his own past and the weight of immortality. But pity was a luxury he could not afford. "Soon," he whispered, "the first move will be made, and the Empire will never be the same." Outside, the winds howled through the shattered spires, carrying the faintest hint of something ancient and terrible, something waiting patiently in the dark folds of the warp. The cold chamber beneath the shattered moon held secrets older than the empire itself. Here, deep in the forgotten archives, the last son confronted a truth he had long sought to bury: the chains of immortality. The ritual tablets glowed faintly on the obsidian altar, their inscriptions etched in dead languages, promising salvation from eternal torment or an eternal damnation disguised as deliverance. Centuries of existence weighed on him like a suffocating shroud. The faces of fallen comrades flickered in his mind. Friends turned to dust while he endured, unyielding, unmoving in the relentless march of time. Each victory, each lost world, was a scar on his soul. The immortality that should have been a gift had become a curse. The whispers from the Immaterium had grown louder in recent cycles. They spoke of a forbidden ritual, one to sever the endless thread that bound him to this unending war, to reclaim mortality, to rest as mortals do. But at what cost? His gauntleted hand brushed the cold surface of the tablets. "End this," he whispered, voice cracked with centuries of grief. "Let me be mortal once more. Let me feel the final breath and the peace beyond." But in the depths of his heart, a shadow of fear stirred. To abandon immortality was to abandon power, to relinquish control over a galaxy teetering on the brink of chaos. What would become of his empire without him? Would his people survive the void he left behind? A sudden, muffled noise echoed through the chamber. The last son's eyes snapped open, and his hand went to the hilt of a dagger worn smooth by endless battles. A figure emerged from the shadows, a silent assassin cloaked in darkness. The blade aimed for the heart that had outlived ages. The attack was swift, but failed. The last son's reflexes, sharpened by centuries, intercepted the strike, and a fierce battle erupted in the cryptic silence. Each strike was a question. Why now? Who sent this death before its time? When the assassin fled into the labyrinthine halls, the last son was left with more questions than answers. The ritual tablets lay untouched, but the cost of his immortality had never felt so sharp. The war within was no longer only in his mind. It had found a deadly echo in the world. As he looked out to the dying light beyond the chamber's fractured window, the weight of eternal life pressed heavier than ever. The chains of immortality were real, unbreakable, or perhaps broken only by the sacrifices he was not yet ready to make. The chambers of the High Council echoed with strained voices and sharp glances. What was once a bastion of unity had grown brittle, its foundations cracking under the weight of ambition and suspicion. The Empire's ruling elite, once bound by unshakable loyalty, now wore facades as cracked as the monuments outside. The fractures were no longer whispers, they were open wounds. The last son sat at the head of the council table, his presence both a command and a burden. His armor, once shining like the dawn, bore the dull patina of countless battles, each scar a silent testament to centuries of survival. Around him, the councillors, lords of worlds, masters of fleets, argued with veiled fury, their voices a chorus of grudges and veiled threats. Vorian, ever the hawk-eyed commander, slammed his fist against the table. "We cannot afford this weakness. The rebellion festers like a poison, and every moment wasted risks the Empire's fall." Lysara's eyes, pools of ancient wisdom, met his with a quiet plea. "We are fractured not just by rebels, but by fear and doubt. The blood oath does not bind ghosts. It binds living hearts. If those hearts break, the oath is meaningless." A murmur of agreement mixed uneasily with scoffs and silence. The council's divisions were more than political, they were personal. Old wounds reopened beneath the veneer of duty. The last son could feel it. The Empire was unraveling, thread by thread. Outside the chamber, the galaxy itself seemed to echo the unrest. Reports flooded in of border worlds turning their backs, of fleets breaking allegiance, of shadows moving with sinister intent. It was no mere rebellion. It was a symphony of discord composed by unseen hands, and through it all, the whispers from the warp grew louder, threading through dreams and waking thoughts alike. The last son found himself torn between the crushing weight of leadership and the haunting lure of the Immaterium's promise. In a rare moment of solitude, he sought counsel from Lysara in the archives, where tomes and relics whispered forgotten truths. "Is there a path through this darkness?" he asked, voice heavy with centuries of hope and despair. Lysara's gaze was steady but burdened. "The path is never clear. The blood oath was forged in fire, but fire consumes as much as it purifies. We must choose what we save and what we are willing to lose." The last son nodded, the quiet resolve returning. The empire might fracture, the blood might spill, but some part of him would endure. He would bind the broken pieces with iron will, or die trying. As the council reconvened beneath storm-darkened skies, the warlord's eyes flickered with ancient fire. The empire's heart beat unevenly, but it still beat, and in that fragile rhythm lay a last, desperate hope. Beneath the crumbling vaults of a dead world, where the starlight was swallowed by perpetual shadow, a council unlike any before convened. The air was thick with dust and silence, broken only by the faint hum of ancient machinery, long forgotten by the living. Here the last bastions of the Empire's power gathered, not in triumph, but in desperation. The strategist Chevra stood among them, his silver eyes gleaming with calculated intent. He spoke not as a servant, but as a herald of a new order. Before him lay the remnants of the High Council, fractured by distrust and weariness, their faces drawn and pale. "We stand on the edge of oblivion," Chevra intoned, his voice steady, almost hypnotic. "Our enemies multiply, our fleets dwindle, and the blood oath fractures. The Immaterium offers us salvation, a chance to reclaim what was lost and bind the galaxy once more beneath our banner." Murmurs spread like wildfire. Some recoiled at the mention of the warp. Others saw the promise of power shimmering beyond the veil of reality. The last son, seated with a grave stillness, met Chevra's gaze. "And the price?" His voice was a low growl, weary but unyielding. "What is demanded in return for such salvation?" Chevra's smile was thin and cold. "A piece of our souls, our autonomy, our very essence bound to forces older than the stars. The ritual will grant dominion, but at the cost of freedom." The chamber fell into a heavy silence. To some, freedom was a small price for survival. To others, an unthinkable sacrifice. Lysara rose, her voice breaking through the tension. "We must consider what it means to trade our will for power. The Immaterium is a storm without mercy. Its gifts are chains forged in shadow." The last son's fingers clenched around the armrest. "Yet without action, we are doomed to fade into oblivion. The choice is no longer between glory and ruin. It is between submission and extinction." Chevra stepped forward, the weight of his conviction filling the room. "I propose a secret treaty, forged in shadows beyond the reach of mortal eyes. We will harness the Immaterium's power to crush rebellion and bind the fracturing empire. But it must remain hidden. The truth of this alliance cannot be known." The councillors exchanged wary glances. The last son weighed the proposition with the centuries of doubt and hope interlaced in his heart. To walk this path was to risk everything he had left, and everything he still dreamed of reclaiming. At last, he nodded. "Prepare the ritual. But know this, we are not pawns. If the price becomes too steep, I will break the chains, even if it shatters us all. As the dead world's shadows deepened and the stars wheeled silently overhead, the Empire took its first fateful step toward a destiny entwined with the Immaterium's endless night. The Siege of the Thousand Moons was not merely a battle. It was the galaxy's lament writ large across the stars. Fleets clashed like titanic beasts in the void, their weapons burning bright against the cold Black Sea. The air in command ships was thick with tension and the scent of burnt circuits as commanders barked orders through grinding Vox systems. But beyond the technical chaos, the true conflict was etched into the eyes of the last son. He stood upon the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Shadow, watching the war unfold with the cold detachment of one who had seen too many suns rise and set on blood-soaked fields. The rebellion's forces swarmed the outer systems like locusts, tearing through defenses that had once seemed impregnable. The Empire's grip was slipping, and with it, the last threads of hope. Yet even as his fleet rained destruction upon the enemy, the last son's mind wandered to darker places, the ever-present whisper of the warp calling to him with promises of power and release. His allies, once steadfast, now questioned his hesitation. Doubt seeded itself like a parasite, gnawing away at the Empire's unity. High Commander Vorian approached, his face grim beneath the glow of the hololith. "My lord," he said, voice low and urgent, "the rebellion's leader grows bold. Their tactics are not mere desperation. They speak of knowledge beyond our ken. We may be facing something more than mere mortals." The last son's eyes narrowed. The warp stirs within them. That much is certain. A sudden explosion rocked the Eternal Shadow, and the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared, and crews scrambled to their stations. Outside the viewport, streaks of fire traced the paths of enemy torpedoes and counterfire. The battle was fierce and unrelenting. But amidst the chaos, a deeper war raged within the last son. His centuries of command weighed heavily. The cost of victory had never been clearer. He had lived through countless sieges, but never one where the enemy seemed to mirror his own doubts and fears. As the battle raged on, an envoy from the strategist Chevra arrived aboard the flagship, bearing a sealed message etched with ancient runes. The last son broke the seal with fingers scarred by time and conflict. The message was simple, yet laden with portent. Embrace the gift. The Immaterium waits. Only through it will the Empire endure. The warlord folded the message carefully, eyes closing as the sirens wailed around him. The choice loomed before him, not just to fight an external enemy, but to confront the silent, seductive storm within his own soul. The stars outside continued to burn, but to the last son, the galaxy felt colder than ever. The warlord's private chambers were a sanctuary and a prison, filled with relics of a bygone era, tattered banners, shattered weapons, and hololiths flickering with images of fallen worlds. Yet tonight, the air was thick with something else, the heavy, suffocating presence of doubt. Lysara sat opposite the last son, her face pale but resolute. "The ritual draws near," she said quietly. "The council has given its reluctant blessing. But the cost?" She hesitated, searching his eyes. "Are you prepared for what it truly means?" He looked away, fingers tracing the cracked edge of a shattered sigil. "Power," he whispered, "is never without price. The question is whether I am willing to pay it, and if it will save what remains." Lysara's gaze hardened. "The Immaterium is a storm that devours all. It will grant strength, yes, but it will also claim your soul. Are you ready to become less than the man you were?" The last son's breath caught. For a moment, the armor of centuries slipped. revealing the fragile core beneath. "I am tired," he admitted, "tired of watching everything I love decay into dust. But I am afraid that in saving the Empire, I may lose myself." Outside the chamber, the galaxy held its breath. Rebellion stirred, shadows deepened, and the tides of fate turned inexorably toward the ritual's dark heart. In the silence that followed, Lysara placed a hand gently over his. "Whatever happens, you are not alone. Even in the darkest night, there are those who will stand beside you." The last son closed his eyes, the weight of eternity pressing down. The path ahead was shrouded in shadow, but the ember of resolve still burned within. The Empire teetered on the edge, and the warlord faced the ultimate choice: surrender to the consuming night, or fight to preserve the last flicker of light, no matter the cost. The storm broke over the shattered skies of Nerethis like a howling beast unleashed from the depths of the Immaterium. Thunder roared and lightning tore through the darkened clouds, illuminating the jagged silhouette of the last sun's fortress against the tempest. The winds carried not just rain, but whispers, voices of the damned, echoes of betrayal, and promises of power. Within the fortress, the air was thick with tension. The ritual chamber, carved from living stone and inscribed with runes pulsing faintly in the gloom, was prepared for the unholy rite. The Blood Oath brothers gathered in solemn silence, their faces masks of determination and dread. The last son stood at the center, his form a towering shadow against the flickering flames of braziers filled with warp-infused oils. His eyes, once bright with ambition, now flickered with the haunted knowledge of what was to come. Lysara stepped forward, her voice steady, despite the storm raging both outside and within. "The Immaterium does not grant power freely. It demands sacrifice, surrender, and the shattering of the self." The warlord nodded, his voice a low vow. "I accept the price. For the Empire, for the Blood Oath, for the future we have fought so long to protect." As the ritual commenced, the air seemed to warp and twist, the very fabric of reality bending under the strain. The runes blazed with unnatural light, and the walls whispered ancient secrets no mortal was meant to hear. Pain tore through the last son's mind and body, an agony beyond flesh, a burning in his soul as the Immaterium reached inside, reshaping, remaking. Time fractured around him, moments stretching into eternity and collapsing into nothingness. His brothers watched, some with hope, others with fear, as their leader was transformed. Yet within that transformation lay the seed of doom. For power borrowed from the warp was a double-edged blade, cutting both outward and inward. When the ritual ended, the last son rose, changed, and yet not. His eyes glowed with an eerie light, and a cold smile touched his lips. The Empire had gained a god, but at what cost? Outside, the storm raged on, the heavens weeping for the fate now sealed. The galaxy trembled beneath the weight of the last son's transformation. Word spread swiftly, whispers carried on fractured comnet, channels, rumors folded into legends. The warlord was no longer merely a man, but a being woven from the Immaterium's dark tapestry, a god crowned by the storm. Yet, with power came a price that was carved deeply into his soul. His thoughts were haunted by shadows of doubt and fragments of memories slipping away like sand through grasping fingers. The immortality granted by the warp was both a gift and a prison, binding him to endless existence while eroding the man he once was. His allies stood divided. Some saw salvation, a new dawn for the Empire's shattered glory. Others recoiled in fear, sensing the growing abyss within their leader. High Commander Vorian's voice was steady but heavy with dread. We have gained a god, yes, but one who walks the edge of madness. Amid the fractured alliance, Lysara remained a steadfast presence, seeking to anchor the last sun's fading humanity. Yet even she could not deny the growing darkness that clung to him like a second skin. As the Empire rallied under this new divine figurehead, rebellion forces scrambled to adapt. Their guerrilla strikes grew bolder, fueled by desperation, and the whispers of their own occult powers gleaned from the Immaterium's depths. The war had become not just a clash of fleets, but a battle for souls. The last sun, now transformed yet tethered by ancient memories, faced a chilling realization. To maintain his grasp on power and preserve the Empire, he would have to make sacrifices far greater than any before. Allies would become enemies, and enemies might hold the keys to salvation. In the stillness of his chamber, where the glow of warp light pulsed softly, he murmured a vow to himself, an echo of the oath that had defined him across millennia. I will endure. I will reign. Even if the stars themselves burn, the Empire's fate balanced on a knife's edge, poised between redemption and ruin. The shadows grew longer across the Empire's heartland, a creeping darkness that no starship's firepower could halt. Within the sprawling fortress city of Valderin, whispers of betrayal wove through gilded halls, like poison-laced threads. Trust, once the Empire's greatest weapon, had become its most fragile vulnerability. The last sun stood atop the high battlements, eyes fixed on the horizon where rebel fires smoldered against the twilight. His mind was a tempest, roiling with visions both real and warped by the Immaterium's touch. The price of his ascension had become evident, not merely in the flicker of his glowing eyes, but in the fractured bonds between those who once stood beside him. Vorian approached, his usual arrogance tempered by a rare gravity. They gather strength, my lord. Even within our ranks, whispers grow of dissent. The blood oath phrase. The warlord's gaze did not waver. Then we will remind them why the oath was sworn. Loyalty must be earned anew in fire and blood. A sudden commotion erupted as a messenger arrived, bearing grim news. A trusted brother had turned, leading a portion of the Imperial fleet into rebellion. The sting of betrayal cut deeper than any enemy's blade. Lysara, ever the voice of reason, urged caution. The Immaterium's gifts come with shadows we have yet to fully grasp. Our enemies use its darkness as a weapon, but so too does it corrupt us from within. The last sun's voice was low, haunted. We walk a razor's edge. Every choice risks the Empire's soul, and mine. As the rebel fleets closed in, the warlord prepared for a battle that would decide not only the fate of worlds, but the very essence of loyalty, betrayal, and the cost of power. In the heart of the storm, the Empire's true war was only beginning. The battlefield stretched like a scar across the void, endless wreckage of starships and shattered dreams drifting in the black between worlds. The last sun's flagship, the Eternal Shadow, hovered at the edge of the conflict, its hull scarred but unyielding. Below, fleets clashed with brutal ferocity, the cacophony of war reverberating through the void and into the hearts of those who fought. Inside the command deck, the warlord stood silent, his eyes reflecting both the firestorm outside and the storm within. The Immaterium's mark upon him was undeniable, the glow in his gaze a constant reminder of the price paid for power. Yet, despite the godlike transformation, doubt gnawed at his soul. Beside him, Lysara's voice cut through the tension. This battle is not just for territory. It is a crucible for our very souls. The rebellion is fueled by desperation and the dark gifts they have seized. We must be wary, for the warp's shadows twist even the strongest hearts. High Commander Vorian's grim nod echoed her words. Our forces are stretched thin. The loyalty of our own fleets falters, and whispers of sedition reach even the highest ranks. The last son's voice was steady, but beneath it lay a fatigue born of centuries. We fight not merely to reclaim worlds, but to salvage what remains of our honor and purpose. The blood oath demands it. As the battle raged, a sudden breach in the fleet's perimeter signaled a turning point. Rebel forces, guided by warp-enhanced tactics, shattered the Imperial lines. Chaos erupted, and the warlord's command was tested as never before. In the crucible of fire and shadow, alliances would be forged and broken. The fate of the Empire and the soul of its immortal leader hung perilously in the balance. The echo of shattered stars reverberated through the void as the last son faced his most harrowing trial yet. The battle that had begun as a clash of fleets had transformed into a crucible of loyalties and betrayal, the fragile bonds between brothers breaking beneath the crushing weight of desperation and ambition. Inside the ruined sanctum of the Empire's capital, voices rose in anger and despair. The Blood Oath brothers, once united in purpose, now stood divided. Accusations flew like shards of broken glass, each word cutting deeper than the last. Vorian, his armor dented and stained, confronted Lysara with a fury born of fear. Your caution is poison. This empire needs strength, not hesitation. We cannot falter now. Lysara's gaze was unyielding. Strength without wisdom is destruction. We are losing ourselves, and soon there will be nothing left to save. The last son moved between them, a shadow of a leader burdened by the weight of centuries. Enough, he commanded, voice heavy but resolute. Our empire stands on the brink. Betrayal festers within and without. We must choose, fight for what remains or let it all crumble. In that moment, a chilling revelation surfaced. A trusted ally had conspired with the rebellion. A serpent coiled within their midst. The betrayal was a wound, deep and raw, threatening to unravel the last threads of unity. The last son's eyes, glowing with the cold fire of the Immaterium, narrowed. Sacrifice will be demanded, he declared. Not all will survive this storm, but from the ashes, a new order will rise. As the warlord prepared to enact the grim justice required, the empire teetered on the edge of ruin. The warlord's hand trembled as he raised the ancient blade, its edge forged in the dying fires of a forgotten star. The chamber, once a place of counsel and hope, was now a crucible of judgment and despair. Faces once familiar, now marked by betrayal and sorrow, surrounded him in a circle of cold accusation. The traitor knelt before the last son, eyes hollow but defiant. I did what was necessary, the voice rasped, for the future of the empire. For your vision, the warlord's gaze bore into the fallen brother, weighing the cost of loyalty and ambition. The Immaterium's light flickered behind his eyes, a reminder of the terrible price already paid. You have shattered the blood oath, the last son intoned, voice heavy with centuries of pain. Yet, it is not merely your treachery I condemn, but the darkness that has taken root within us all. Lysara stepped forward, her presence a fragile thread of hope in the storm. This empire was built on sacrifice, but its survival demands more than vengeance. It demands a reckoning of the soul. The chamber fell into a profound silence, broken only by the distant rumble of war beyond the walls. The last son lowered his blade, a gesture both of mercy and mourning. We stand at the edge of oblivion, he said softly. The choices we make now will echo through eternity. To save the empire, we must be willing to lose everything, even ourselves. The traitor bowed his head, accepting his fate, while the warlord turned toward the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, indifferent to the struggles below. In that moment, the Empire's fate was sealed, not by conquest or defeat, but by the heavy toll of sacrifice and the haunting cost of immortality. And the final chapter of its long and tragic saga drew near. The dying sun bled its last crimson rays across the shattered horizon, casting long shadows over the ruins of what once was the heart of the Empire. Silence hung heavy, a silence born not of peace, but of finality. The air was thick with ash and memories, the weight of centuries pressing down on the weary shoulders of the last son. He stood alone amidst the crumbled monuments and fractured statues, relics of glory long faded into myth. His eyes, glowing faintly with the unholy light of the Immaterium, scanned the desolation with a sorrow that spanned millennia. The empire he had fought to save was no more, its legacy buried beneath the dust of 1,000 worlds. Immortality, once a blessing, now revealed itself as a cruel torment. To endure when all you love is lost, to watch the endless cycle of rise and ruin repeat without end, that was the true curse. His soul bore the scars of every betrayal, every sacrifice, every choice that had carved this ruin. Yet even in this twilight, a faint ember of hope flickered, a reminder that endings are but beginnings in disguise. The stars above, cold and indifferent, promised nothing, yet they also whispered of secrets still buried in the dark. The last sun knelt among the ruins, placing a hand upon the shattered stone of the blood oath altar. His voice, weary yet resolute, broke the silence. The empire is gone, but the oath remains. In loss, there is meaning. In death, a kind of mercy. The winds stirred, carrying the faintest echo of distant voices. Brothers long lost, their sacrifices etched into the fabric of eternity. The Immaterium's light flickered one last time in his eyes, before fading into the encroaching night. He rose, turning away from the ruins toward the infinite void. The curse of immortality was eternal, but so too was the memory of those who had stood and fallen. The last sun would endure, a solitary sentinel amidst the endless stars. And as the final sun died, so too did an era, a testament to the price of power, the sting of betrayal, and the unyielding march of time.